I came home from military deployment to find my grandfather's cabin reduced to splinters and rubble. The HOA president was waiting in my driveway with a smug smile and a demolition bill for $12,000, claiming I owed back fees that never legally existed. What she didn't know was that my entire family works for the federal government. Dad's FBI white-collar crime, Mom's IRS criminal investigation, sister's ATF, and me, military intelligence. You could still smell the diesel exhaust hanging in the mountain air, mixed with the sweet scent of crushed cedar logs that had held 4 generations of Christmas mornings and summer fishing trips. Standing in what used to be our kitchen, I looked at this woman who had just made the biggest mistake of her corrupt little life. Vivian Blackthorne, or Karen Whitmore, as she first introduced herself, thought she was bulldozing some helpless military family's cabin. Instead, she had declared war on a federal task force disguised as Sunday dinner guests. What would you do if someone destroyed your family legacy out of pure spite? Let me back up 18 months to when this nightmare started. I'm Marcus Sterling, 52, spent 25 years in Army logistics before retiring to the mountains. My uncle Theodore left me this little cabin on what I thought was just another pretty lake somewhere between Colorado and Montana. The old guy was always the family oddball, lived like a hermit, but somehow had money stashed everywhere. The cabin wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen straight out of 1970, but the view was everything. Sitting on a back porch with morning coffee, watching mist rise off perfectly still water while loons called back and forth. That was peace after decades of military chaos. The lake was shaped like a teardrop, 47 acres of pristine mountain water surrounded by 12 modest homes. Nothing fancy, just regular folks wanting quiet retirement spots. At least that's what I thought until Karen moved in 3 houses down about 6 months after me. White BMW, white teeth, white lies. Everything about her screamed she didn't belong here, but was taking over anyway. She was 48, sold real estate, married to some city council wannabe named Derek. Within 2 weeks, she was elected HOA president. Amazing how that works when you're the only one who actually wants the job. My first red flag came when she introduced herself. I was out on the dock working on my boat engine, the Chris Craft I bought as a wreck and spent 3 years restoring. Every bolt, every piece of mahogany, every chrome fitting lovingly rebuilt. She clip-clopped down in ridiculous heels, smiled her realtor smile, and said, "Oh, you're the military man. I hope you understand we maintain certain standards around here." That phrase dripped with condescension. The boat became her obsession. Too big, too loud, didn't match her aesthetic vision for the waterfront community. Never mind that half the other docks had boats just as large. Never mind that mine was probably the most beautiful vessel on the water. Karen had decided I was the problem, and Karen always got her way. The smell of her expensive perfume lingered on the dock long after she left, mixing unnaturally with the honest scent of cedar shingles warming in the morning sun and the creosote from old dock pilings. It felt like an invasion. That first violation notice arrived on a Tuesday. Crisp white paper, official HOA letterhead, enough legal-sounding threats to intimidate anyone who didn't know better. Oversized recreational vessel violates community aesthetic standards per Covenant 14. 7B, $200 daily until removed. Military training teaches you to gather intelligence before reacting. So instead of getting angry, I got curious. Who was this woman who thought she could order around a retired Army officer on his own property? And more importantly, what didn't I know about Uncle Theodore's gift that might change the game? Vivian's first major power move came while my boots were still muddy from German soil. She scheduled an emergency HOA meeting on a Wednesday afternoon at 2 p.m., when normal working people are actually working. At that little gathering of 7 in her living room, she railroaded through a special assessment resolution. Our cabin was now officially in architectural noncompliance with standards that didn't exist when my grandfather built the place. She created a 47-page violation report. 47 pages for a simple family cabin. Our dock was excessively large at 12 by 8 feet. Our native wildflower garden was unapproved landscaping. The fire pit my grandfather built for roasting marshmallows was an unregistered combustible hazard. She turned a family retreat into a federal disaster zone on paper, complete with backdated documentation. While I was analyzing enemy communications overseas, Vivian was manufacturing evidence like a seasoned operative. When I finally returned from deployment, there was a stack of legal papers on my doorstep thick enough to stop shrapnel. The smell of mold had already started creeping through the cabin windows after months of forced neglect, that sour, musty odor that tells you something's dying inside walls that used to smell like pine and family dinners. That's when my training kicked in. I cleared the kitchen table and started building a threat assessment board, just like I'd done with Taliban networks in Afghanistan. I took our case to military legal aid. Captain Rodriguez nearly spilled her coffee when she reviewed Vivian's paperwork. Sergeant Garrison, this is textbook violation of the Service Members Civil Relief Act. They can't proceed with enforcement actions against deployed personnel without following federal notification protocols. I learned there are laws specifically protecting military families from this kind of bureaucratic ambush while serving overseas. The real shocker came when I contacted the property management company my parents had hired for basic maintenance during deployment. They'd mysteriously stopped all services 3 months earlier. The manager finally admitted Vivian had threatened their contractor license unless they abandoned our property. She'd weaponized her construction industry connections to economically isolate us. Siege warfare with building permits. So I went deeper. Public records, corporate filings, financial disclosures. All perfectly legal intelligence gathering. Buried in the Secretary of State database, I found pure gold. The HOA's corporate registration had expired 8 months ago. They had zero legal enforcement authority. Vivian had been running a ghost organization. Meanwhile, neighbors started whispering their own horror stories. 3 other lakefront families faced identical harassment campaigns. Same manufactured violations, same bureaucratic timing, same intimidation tactics. You could feel the community tension, that electric anticipation when people realize someone's finally going to fight back. 2 weeks later, Vivian escalated to full-scale psychological warfare. She filed a public safety complaint with the county claiming our dock posed an imminent drowning hazard to community children. The same 12 by 8 foot dock where 3 generations of kids learned to swim without incident. She scheduled the county inspection for 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, right when normal families would be at work. The inspector was Dale Henricks, mid-50s, the kind of man who drives a lifted truck with truck nuts on the hitch and calls everyone buddy in the tone that means the opposite. My ATF sister Mackenzie would later discover he'd been flagged in federal databases for accepting contractor kickbacks. I'd set up trail cameras around the property, perfectly legal on your own land. The footage showed Vivian and Dale walking our dock 3 days before the surprise inspection, measuring, photographing, having a very detailed conversation about structural integrity. During the official inspection, Dale spent exactly 4 minutes before declaring the dock structurally compromised and an imminent collapse risk. Funny thing, it had been professionally inspected and certified just 6 months earlier. That evening, I called a family council of war. Dad brought his FBI methodology. Mom had her IRS financial forensics mindset. Mackenzie came armed with ATF database access. This was textbook racketeering, using official processes for personal financial gain, coordinated with multiple actors. Federal RICO violations if we could prove the pattern. Mom pulled property tax records and found Vivian had been claiming adjacent properties as abandoned or condemned to reduce her own tax assessments, literally profiting from harassing neighbors. Mackenzie dropped the bombshell. Dale had been involved in a 2019 bridge collapse that killed 2 people. His inspection license should have been permanently suspended, but he was still operating illegally. The next morning, Vivian showed up with a construction crew, claiming authority to immediately secure the hazardous dock. 5 guys with chainsaws and sledgehammers ready to demolish property without a warrant. I stepped onto that supposedly dangerous dock and calmly informed them they were trespassing on private property without legal authority. Everything recorded, everyone polite but firm. "Ma'am, You're welcome to call the sheriff if you believe you have legal authority here. I'll wait." The chainsaws went silent. That's when I knew we had her. 3 weeks later, using Dale's fraudulent report, she convinced the county to issue an actual demolition order for the entire cabin. It was scheduled for the Friday after Thanksgiving. Maximum emotional damage, minimum witnesses. We were all gathered for what we thought would be a normal Thanksgiving. The smell of Mom's sage stuffing mixing with pine smoke from the fireplace. Sheriff's Deputy Martinez showed up, hat in hand, looking miserable. He was an Iraq veteran and recognized military bearing. Something smells fishy about this whole situation, but I'm legally obligated to serve these papers. Y'all might want to lawyer up fast. Emergency demolitions require 10-day minimum notice under state law with judicial review. Vivian had somehow convinced a judge our cabin presented such immediate peril that normal protections didn't apply. We activated like the federal task force we'd accidentally become. Dad called FBI contact about civil rights violations under color of law. Mom launched an IRS investigation into Vivian's construction business. Mackenzie coordinated with the sheriff's department about Dale's illegal activities. Then Mom's IRS training uncovered the real motive. Vivian had purchased 12 acres of prime lakefront in 2019 through Serenity Development, LLC, with herself as managing partner. Development permits described a $2.3 million luxury glamping resort, contingent on removing all non-conforming structures from adjacent properties. Our cabin was blocking her path to millions. 5 other families had been targeted with identical campaigns. She used HOA authority to create problems, then offered to buy the properties at below market value. Textbook racketeering. Her construction business tax returns showed $340,000 in suspicious consultation fees to county officials. Dale received monthly payments disguised as retainers. Her brother-in-law was president of the bank that pre-approved the $2.3 million construction loan. We'd uncovered a criminal enterprise. The family dining room became a federal command center. Military organizational charts on the walls, evidence timelines on whiteboards for government agencies coordinating. Dad took point on federal prosecution strategy, conspiracy to deprive civil rights, racketeering, mail fraud, wire fraud, money laundering. Mom identified every asset connected to the conspiracy. Mackenzie coordinated multi-agency law enforcement. I handled threat assessment and pattern analysis. Within weeks, we had surveillance authorization, asset investigations, cooperating witnesses from the targeted families, even a local hardware store owner who documented supply denials for 3 years. Vivian sensed the walls closing in and escalated. Contractors sabotaged our electrical lines, water pump, septic system, captured on trail cameras. She sent anonymous letters to our workplace security offices claiming we pose security risks. Threatening federal employees activates counterintelligence protocols. She tried to bribe one of Dad's FBI colleagues at a coffee shop. $25,000 cash to lose some paperwork. Handed over an envelope to an active agent while wearing a wire. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for attempting to bribe a federal officer." That same day, Dale was arrested trying to flee the state. She set her own office on fire to destroy records, accelerant residue, and sledgehammer damage to hard drives. But federal investigators already had backups from subpoenas. She staged a break-in at her own home, claiming we'd planted military equipment and surveillance devices. The evidence was laughably amateur. Brand new notes with store creases, civilian camping gear passed off as military, smoke detectors with labels removed. She attempted to transfer assets offshore and bribe a federal judge through an intermediary. Every move was monitored, every transaction tracked. The annual community safety meeting was supposed to be her victory lap. 200 residents packed the building. Federal agents were positioned throughout the audience. We entered together, me in dress uniform. Applause started with the veterans and spread. Vivian took the podium and began her vindication speech, blaming outside agitators and government overreach. I connected my laptop and played surveillance footage of her contractors sabotaging our property. Dad identified himself as FBI Special Agent Franklin Garrison and announced multiple federal indictments. Dale was walked in handcuffed by ATF agents and confessed on the spot. She paid me to fake safety reports on properties she wanted to acquire. Vivian screamed about persecution, but her voice was drowned out. Mom presented IRS findings. 5 targeted families gave testimony. As she shouted her final denial, FBI agents moved in. Handcuffs clicked. Miranda rights were read in front of news cameras and the entire community. 6 months later, Vivian was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison plus $2. $3 million in restitution. Dale got 18 months and lost all licenses. The county commissioner resigned after pleading guilty to bribery. Our civil lawsuit settlement provided full compensation for the demolished cabin, plus punitive damages. We built a new cabin on the same foundation, bigger, modern, with a wraparound porch for 3 generations of Sunday dinners. The smell of fresh cedar and lake breeze mixes with Mom's chocolate chip cookies. The old HOA was dissolved. A new organization with transparency, term limits, and accountability replaced it. The state passed protections for service members against HOA harassment. We established a veteran scholarship fund and an annual fishing tournament that became the community's biggest celebration. Federal agencies created an HOA abuse task force. Our story inspired reform in 23 states and a documentary called When David Has a Federal Badge. The evening breeze carries families laughing around lakefront fire pits, the crackle of burning cedar, the gentle splash of fish jumping in water that belongs to everyone. This is what America looks like when good people refuse to let corruption win. Justice tastes like victory, sounds like community, and feels like coming home. Thanks for listening to HOA Stories. Drop your own nightmare experiences in the comments. We read every one. Some become federal cases when families know their rights. Hit subscribe for the next drama. You don't want to miss it.